Okay, it is 8:31 and welcome to week four of Introduction to Corrections 4. And my name is Richard Wright, and actually we have just 2 more weeks to go, but only one more lecture. So you need to remember that. I want to start out by talking about the fact that I last week talked about the Chauvin case, but I want to start out tonight just by talking about what's going on out in Elizabethtown, North Carolina, and some of the issues that are taking place out there are amazing to me. Not not providing body cams properly. Um, it concerns me. Um, and what I dislike a lot about it is that there are some officers out there who are giving the whole field of law enforcement a bad name because there's far more in number that are good. And my job is to continue to produce those. I say it to all of my students without hesitation. I've been saying it for years and years: ethical, professional, and educated. And that's my goal. So I know this is corrections, but the same thing applies there as well. Make sure that you're very professional. And I've gone on record to say that when it comes to corrections, that um, more and more correction officers are hired who are educated so that they can function more professionally and above all uh, ethically, and to do the job of trying to help uh, to deal with the problems of the inmates. I always remind students that corrections is equal to the hospital, except the hospital that you're dealing with, uh, rather the patient that has it's almost like a mental health situation, which mental health does go into it, along with drugs and uh, other issues. But those are the two big features, and that you will become the people, whether you're probation, parole, jail, or prison. Um, you will find yourself in situations where you have to deal with that. I have a former student who came out of high school years and years and years ago here in Illinois, and she rose to the ranks of major, the highest rank you could get. And she shared many stories with me about things that she had to deal with, and that noticing the trend of, and by the way, she started with a high school education, but she continued. She graduated with an associate's. I was at her graduation. Then she graduated with her bachelor's at another school. And the point of the matter is that education is so important. And so is my commitment to do that. All right, let me share my screen so we can go ahead and get started here. Okay, let's move this over. So what I want to do, the analytics. So I'm going to do the student preview for now. Let me enter student preview mode. Why it's not working. Here. Oh, I know why. Start preview. That was covering it. Okay. So anyway, over here is where you can always check your emails You hover over the name. If it's highlighted, tells you emails that, and these are all my emails. This does not show the emails that you sent. If I was in regular mode, you would see those. And usually the older ones are at the top. If you notice, they're chronologically from last week all the way to the first week. And so that's how your emails operate. All right. In your grade book, when it comes down to it, this is how you see your grades. So let's take a look at week number 4. Before I get to week number 4, be aware that I will be finishing week 3 before or by Friday, which is the 30th, the last day of the month, as every Friday from weeks 1 and weeks 2 that you got your grades. But I do want to let you know that some students who I might have even given extension to will see on that Monday after the assignment is due, which in this case was the 26th, that if you didn't have your assignments in, I had a 0 in there. That did not mean that you wouldn't get your grades. What that simply meant is that you hadn't submitted it. And I have to do that for 2 reasons. Number 1, to bring to your attention missed assignments. And number 2, to let the advisors know what your average is up to that point. Because each week the advisors take a look at, see how students are doing in the classes. So if you do turn in your work later, based on extension, or you do submit it in late, I may change the grade. Depends on how many dates that it's late. Remember, if you lose so many points, 10% each day, you could get a very low grade by Thursday, because you will have lost 60% of the grade, or rather 40% of the grade. So it's very important for you to get your assignments in on time. Again, I repeat constantly, pay close attention to the rubrics. The reason why some of you get low grades is very simple. You leave out the citations in the body of your papers. You might put references, but that doesn't do it. Citations support the statements of the assignment that you do, not a citation. And the rubric says credible sources, and that's another way of saying credible citations, sources that you utilize. Never use Wikipedia. I had one student to use Wikipedia, but it was not in this class, and they got big point cut for doing that. So those are things I want to say. Now, the last thing I want to say is this concerning that before I go to week 4. At the end of this week, that would be May the 2nd, by 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time, all assignments from week 1 to 3 that are not turned in will not be accepted unless I've made previous arrangements with you. And that's the way it's going to be, because basically the first half of the course is over, and we're heading to the second half of the course, starting with this week, week 4. The other thing that I do want to make sure that you understand is our schedule that will be coming up during week number 5, which is next week. And you'll see what I'm talking about in a few minutes as I go to the course calendar. So let's take a look at the written assignments for this week, before I actually get into the lecture. So here they are, the written assignment, probation officer, and it's due May the 2nd. Scoring is done with the rubric, which I'll go over in just a few minutes. And the maximum point is 60. Okay. So now here is what the assignment is about. And you use this scenario as a probation officer. And then you're going to create a job announcement for the position, and that includes the continuing of probation officer duties, describe 4 roles of a probation officer, and include specific examples. Surveillance, broker of services, liaison of court, change agent intervention. And you're going to provide credible sources. I just got through talking about that. So that means in the actual announcement, properly set up to get your points. I will go over that again in a few minutes with the rubric. So if you have a question about these things, we're going to talk about some of them tonight and what roles that probation officers are supposed to do. You should be aware of one fact, and that is that a probation officer a person can only become a probation officer in most jurisdictions that I know of by obtaining a bachelor's degree. They don't generally allow. Okay. The 4 roles we should describe are the surveillance, broker services, liaison, and change agents. And what it's saying here is this, is that these are specific examples of what probation officer is required to do in fulfilling these roles: to conduct surveillance, broker of services, liaisons to the court, and to be change agents or to operate in intervention for them. So the answer to your question is yes. Please, please do not cite the textbook as a source, a credible source. I get tired of seeing that because you're supposed to do research. Do some research. Use the Library and Learning Center. Find some sources to help you find that information out. Okay? If you do use the text, use it sparingly, very sparingly. All right? So here is the rubric. And you get a chance to see, for 60 points. And so the summary you're going to provide, always mastery. Exemplary summary of the amount of about the continuing of probation officer duties. See, with credible sources, not a credible source. Okay. A description of each role. Mastery. Description of each role with thorough supporting evidence from credible sources. You see how important citations are, not just references. What's that? Examples of probation officers, exemplary examples of probation officer work with thorough evidence from credible sources. It says it over and over and over. I guarantee you there's going to be some students who are going to end up down here because they're either going to have incomplete examples of probation officer work and missing supporting credible sources. And you can only get 10.89. Whole big difference. That's half the grade. You don't want to do that. And then get your spelling and grammar correct. Most of the time you guys do pretty well with this, so you end up with that. But that's for that total of 60 points. All the way from summary to a description of each row, examples, and that's how you prepare. Remember, you're preparing not a narrative, but you are doing a job announcement. What kind of form do I want it? Word document. Do not submit it any other way, if otherwise you will not get points. You will get a 0. Okay, I'm going to go over that again in a few minutes. And that's the written assignment for the week that is due Sunday. Any questions? If so, type in the chat box. I'll address it, like the one that was just asked. Any? Okay. If I don't see anything, that means there are none. So then let's go back to student mode again, so that I don't end up revealing what's in my grade book. Give me a second. Okay, we close that. Okay, and then you know how to submit it. Okay, now, of course, your discussion post, intermediate sanctions, initial posts are due as of last night. Your reply posts are due by Saturday. Here is the scenario that you're utilizing and what your instructions are for your posts, your initial posts. Explain the intermediate sanction. Explain what it is as a result of Pat's violation, and support the selection, detailing why you selected it. Explain that and include potential problems, potential issues as well. Then in the reply post, select a different intermediate sanction if possible. Okay, that is due on Saturday. Okay, and then of course your quiz. So for the student preview, your quiz, and I'm not going to start attempt, but it tells you have 30 minutes. You have 3 attempts. I do recommend that you do that after you've gone through all the materials there. And this is how you start it. By the way, once you hit this, it is going to start the time to run. You cannot stop it or freeze it because it will automatically time you out. You already know that, though. And your last attempt must be no later than Sunday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time, May 2nd. And then your live classroom lecture that I give to the students to get your points. Those are the assignments. Okay, so now I'm going to go back in, and I want to, before I do anything else, is go to the topic of prisoner rights and evolution of probation. That's what this whole module is about. And again, what was that again? If you've completed all 3 attempts and cannot figure out what we got wrong on the quiz? Can we follow up with you and discuss what we got wrong and talk about it? I cannot do that. The reason why I cannot do that is because of the fact that um, it's just when you do these tests and people are taking it different times. If everybody was taking it at one time, at the same time, then yes. But as you already know, it's not like that. You have until then. So I can't do that. I cannot do that. We talked about that one time in our sessions with the deans some time ago, and that was relating to giving answers to the quizzes. And it turned out that that came back to demonstrate that there were some instances where people actually use that information because the quizzes don't change from the time. If you take this course now and you take it the next time, it's going to be the same information. So they won't allow us to do that. Okay, which you'll know what you got wrong each time you take the quiz. You know what you got wrong because of the fact that you missed so many. All right. So that's why we can't do that. And then this is 3 times you can take it. You're not supposed to take notes. You're not supposed to have stickies or none of those things. This is strictly a closed book exam. That is why we talk about what's going to be on the test. We really do talk about what's on the test because what it is a combination of your readings, the PowerPoints, the lectures, and then finally the last thing is completing the written assignments, discussion posts, as well as written assignments. That should prepare you for that. Okay. All right. Let's take the chat out of the way. All right. So I already told you about these things here, but one more time, I want you to see the grading rubric. Now, if you notice here, you're seeing all areas. But remember what I told you. See, over here you get 100%. If you do things that I said earlier, all the way down, you get 100% of the grade, or a quarter of the grade, or 1/3, 33%, or 33%, and then 9%. That adds up to 100%. And then over here, if you go to emerging, see how you pretty much get a little over half of the grade. That's not what you want to do. You don't want to be in between. If you have minimal supporting, the key thing is you want to provide, ask yourself this. If I picked up your assignment to read it, am I going to believe that you wrote all of this without getting it from somewhere? Well, now, even people that have experience, we still, as lawyers, we would still cite things so that we can provide it to the reader, the sources as to where to find it. Okay. So it's very, 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 very important. By the way, they allow us to, well, we don't do that, the percentage range, but we give the percentage for the whole area. Credible sources, as you can see, is so important all the way through. All the way through. Okay, so these don't end up over here. And I will tell you in comments that I put in the grade book what you did wrong. But you should know up front because I'm telling you, I'm stressing credible sources. Credible sources for your information. All right. Take time to find the information that you need to support covering the information requested in the written assignment. That's what it amounts to. Okay. So then we already discussed discussion post and then the quiz. And so now, before we get into the actual module, I want to go to the course calendar. So you can see, again, I like to do the month view. And you can see in April where we are, right here where this circle is, the 28th. So your initial post was due last night. Your lecture is tonight. Your reply post is due the 1st. Then we go to May. And you see you're back to May 1st for your reply post. And then your written assignments due the 2nd. Okay. Notice this, that next week's lecture is the last lecture, because if we did it on a Wednesday, the class would be over. But there is no week 6 lecture in this course. So in week 5, I talk about the assignments that are due for the 11th. The course ends on the 11th. So see how close we are to the end. So when we do next week's lecture, we'll be less than a week of the course being over. It absolutely ends on the 11th. Initial posts are due that day, of course, as usual, as well as reply posts. Okay, they're due for week 6 for that. We'll talk about that, and then there will be the final quiz there. So you see what I mean. The new term starts the next day, May 12th. So that's the course calendar, so that no one is confused about that. Now let's look at the announcement for this week. Then we get into the topic. Notice the announcements. I used to take them out, but I said, no, I'm just going to leave them all in there so that you can see, starting from week 1, rubric. I don't put the rubric in there anymore because it confused some students. I want them to understand how the rubric looks when you see it when you grade it. You know what you're looking at. Look at mastery. Week 1, and then my reminder about adversity, springboard to success, all the way to the current one. The last one will always be at the top. So the announcement for this week talks about the topic that we've been talking about so far, prisoner rights and evolution of probation. And you're going to read chapters 8 and 9 of the text. And then I sent you the PowerPoints that correspond with that. And then look at the activities, which we're going to go over briefly. Law of corrections and prisoner rights and community supervision. Corrections, law, and prisoner rights activity. I'll show you how to do that for yourself. And then your sentencing and sanctions vocabulary review and evolutionary role of the probation officer, which we will talk about in a few minutes. It shows you how the roles have evolved. And as I said before, the reason why it evolved and changed so much is because of the fact that more education is getting. So you actually almost become a caseworker or a counselor. Okay, and then the written assignment, we talked about that, the quiz. And you know when those are due, that's Sunday. And then the mid-quarter student survey. Some students have submitted them already. One comment I noticed in a couple of the surveys that I did see that people did submit is that grades are submitted late. I says, no grades have been submitted late in this class. The rule is, and you can verify that with your deans or your advisors, that from Sunday, when you complete your assignment, that grades are due by the end of that Friday or 11:59 p.m. And I have adhered to that for weeks 1 and 2, and I will be doing the same for this week. Okay. Be strong and finish strong. We're coming near the finish. And then you know what my motto is all about as well. And that's the announcement for this week. Okay. Let's get into the discussion. About 28 more minutes. So you know where to find your live recording. I send you an email, but it's also going to be here. Right here now, it gives you the current one for the lecture, but then I replace that with the recorded lecture after I finish. And you could click, and then that'll be clickable. And then, of course, that is due again on the 2nd. You see the due dates on here for these things. All right. So now, the law that applies to corrections and prisoner rights is based upon the laws of this country. First of all, it's the United States Constitution, which you all should be familiar with. I got in the mail today from the ACLU a complete little pocket copy of the U.S. Constitution that I just kind of like gleaned through it, which is very nice. And they sent this to me because of requesting a donation from me for the ACLU. But the Constitution, statutes, case law, and regulations. So the Constitution, of course, deals with the 3 branches of government: executive, legislative, and judicial. The legislative branch is Congress, which consists of the House, which is 435 members, and the Senate, which consists of 100 members. And so far, that's the way it is. They're talking about changing that by adding DC to statehood, and if that takes place, that'll change that number. But as of now, that's what it is. And they pass the laws, and then they send them to the executive branch, which is headed by the president. And the president's executive branch operates with the cabinet that the president has and all the different agencies that operate as well. And then the interpreter of case law or statutes is the United States Supreme Court, which consists of 9 members. They've been pretty active. They got a speech case that involved a high school student and using social media. They got a big case coming up on gun rights, which I can't wait to see because they haven't had a gun rights case since 2003, I believe it was. So the Supreme Court, they're the ones who deal with the interpretation of the statutes and executive orders and other things. And so this is what I told you. So judges make the decisions interpreting the statutes. And then there's regulations. Regulations are through administrative agencies such as Social Security Administration, EEOC, EPA, Environmental Protection Act, agency, and all of those different things. So to implement the policies of the agency itself. Okay. So the Constitution consists, the first 10 amendments consist of what we call the Bill of Rights. And then an important one that was passed in 1868 is the 14th Amendment. Now, prior to the 14th Amendment existing, the Constitution did not apply to the state law. But after that, the 14th Amendment, interpreted by the Supreme Court to apply the Bill of Rights to prohibit states and cities, municipalities, villages from violating a person's due process and equal protection rights. And so the 14th Amendment is a big topic that the courts have been dealing with and interpreting due process and what that basically means. And just a summary of it, it just simply means you have a right to a hearing, or you are innocent until proven guilty, those kind of things. Before 1960, the courts operated what we call laissez-faire. That's French for hands off, and dealing with due process, which means that even though it was there, the courts left the interpretation to the state law judges. While some states use their constitution, because many states and almost every state now has a constitution to correct abuses in prisons and jails, and some issue about individuals forfeiting all legal rights. Now the courts have come back and said if it violates the federal rights of an individual of the U.S. Constitution, then the federal court will intervene. Okay, and then these are some of the cases that deal with individuals in prison dealing with the First Amendment, all the way from dealing with religion pretty much, and the policies to going down to receiving mail and how mail can be manned if reasonably related, because sometimes things are smuggled in the mail. And then in 2006, now these are all cases that came out. They don't give the names, but in 2006, denied magazines, newspapers, and photographs to incorrigible residents in the system in an effort to promote security, because there are a whole lot of things that were going on. You should be aware that magazines, not just pornographic, but all kinds of magazines have been used and sent to inmates or provided to inmates, where I had a case this actually happened, where a correction officer lost his job because he was providing magazines that were given by the family. They later found out that those magazines had been soaked in drugs or PCP and dried out and ironed out, and the person would get the pages. They weren't interested in reading it. They would chew the pages and get high. Believe it or not, that actually happened. The Fourth Amendment, search and seizure, very important. When you are in prison or in jail, incarcerated, there's some relaxing of the law, you can see from these cases, which says conversations recorded in jail visitor rooms are not protected by the Fourth Amendment. However, that the exception is with attorneys, and then also with ministers that are provided to people as well. Also the conversations dealing with health issues, but visitors themselves, they can be listened to and heard. Look what it says in 1972, a warrantless search of a cell is not unreasonable, because basically what it is to maintain control. Strip searches after contact visits may be carried out, and you know why that is. And then in 84, officials may search cells without a warrant and seize materials found there to maintain control. We get to the Eighth Amendment, dealing with excessive bail. Bail should be properly issued, commensurate with the crime itself. And remember, the purposes of bail are, number one, to ensure that the person will appear back in court, and to keep from overloading the jails if possible. Okay. And then these are different cases that you can take a look at that are dealing with double selling. There are people who want that, but for obvious reasons of overcrowdedness, double selling is necessary. Regulations, now jumping down to 2003, regulations suspending visiting privileges for 2 years for people who who failed 2 drug tests is not cruel and unusual punishment, because there's a control issue there. And then finally, the 14th Amendment deals with all the way from where a law in a state that was used to segregate white from black individuals in prisons is unconstitutional. They don't want to do that. What they will do is segregate, of course, various factions of gangs from each other for obvious reasons. And you come all the way down, the prison regulations don't violate due process unless they place a typical, atypical, and significant hardship on that individual. So generally, the courts will support what the prisoners fall under to maintain control. And so these are just some of the cases. So the key thing, as Justice Scalia explained about the rights of probationers and parolees, it's always true of probationers as well as parolees. They do not enjoy absolute liberty. That every citizen is entitled to only conditional liberty, properly dependent on observation of specific restrictions or special restrictions, which means they must abide by what the court issues in terms of policy for them. And that's how the law operates. Just very briefly, coming down here, if you take a look at this you can see the Bill of Rights. And then case law examples. And these are various cases that you can click on, and it tells you about it. For more information, you click on it. So all the way from Griffin versus Wisconsin, where it gives you the warrantless search of petitioner's residence was reasonable. And the reason why that is because of the fact that to maintain control. But it says it was reasonable within the Fourth Amendment search and seizure because it was conducted pursuant to a regulation that was reasonable to the needs, special needs of a population system. And then in 1998, these cases, evidence that would be barred by the exclusionary rule from the use in a criminal trial can be used in parole revocation hearings. And the reason is because, as you should know, the parole and probation violations deal with not the standard of beyond a reasonable doubt, but preponderance of the evidence. And then these are some more cases that you can take a look at, various case law examples that deal with specifics. The right to counsel in a revocation and sentencing before a deferred sentence could be imposed came about because of this case. And then this one I know real well because we dealt with this in law school. A hearing officer determines if there's probable cause that a violation occurred, but the parolee has the due process rights that I talked about earlier, notified about the charges, just like in a criminal case, speak on their behalf, present witnesses, confront the witnesses against them. At a revocation hearing, the parolee must receive notice of the charges and disclose evidence and the evidence of a possible violation and cross-examination witnesses. So that's basic due process under Morrissey versus Brewer. That's the big ticket there. And then finally, Gagnon versus Scarapelli. Parolees in Morrissey versus Brewer that I talked about a few minutes ago also apply to probationers. Before it was parolees, so you know the difference. Morrissey versus Brewer did not address probation; it addressed just parolees. But the Gagnon extended it, and also the right to counsel should be granted on a case-by-case basis, depending on the issues themselves, mitigating circumstance, and the competence of the individual, which most time is short enough that they get an attorney. 1983 is a section of the United States Code that talks about the means for incarcerated individuals to bring lawsuits. Applies only to incarcerated individuals. Not only to incarcerated individuals, but those on probation and parole. That is, on violations of their constitutional rights. Now, there's a statute that limits the number of lawsuits that can take place before you exhaust all administrative hearings. And you learn about that as well. Because the reason for that is to prevent floodgate. The old floodgate system where lawsuits are filed. Trust me, I had clients that would bring me motions that they hand wrote, and I would tell them, no, I'm not presenting those motions. And they would say, oh, well, my cellie said if I present this motion, I could get out. I said, well, if your cellie was so good at that, why are they still in there? Then they would shut up. Okay, and then that's it. Okay. So these are the cases that there. So now you understand that, and you can always go back and look at that. Looking at the time. Okay. So this deals with the evolution and foundation of legal rights. There are 4 foundations. Now, we already talked about them, so I'm not going to talk about them. So you understand that this, and you will be able to find more by just clicking on them. That we already talked about, the case law, and then the various regulations. It's showing you how you can find that out, but we already covered that. Right? I'm going too fast. Sometimes just stop me if you have a question about an area that I'm in. Sentencing and sanctions. So you should be aware that sentences can be shorter, and sanctions can be given to correct the individuals. Intermediate sanctions that we talk about deals with various methods that we're going to talk about in just a few minutes for people who are on probation and reporting requirements and things of that nature. But remember this, the goal of community supervision, which is called probation, is to avoid the cost of incarceration or to decrease the numbers. And so what it does is it gives you a second chance. When a court sentences a person to probation, the judge issues the conditions and you must comply with those conditions. If you do not, you can end up having a revocation. And as I showed you earlier, a hearing could take place and then you could end up spending the rest of the time behind bars. So it says the probationer would no longer have the option of community supervision and must serve the remainder of their sentence depending on the severity of the offense. So probation officers don't want to put people in jail just for a violation. But if they continuously violate, and if it's a serious offense, they have no other choice. All right, it's one of the last things they want to do. All right, so all the way, starting with fines, and you can take a look at that. All right, and then let's go back. Let's go back to that. Okay, so fines and restitution, community service work. These are intermediate sanctions. Drug and alcohol treatment, which is very serious for many offenders, that you hear me say over and over, that people commit crimes to support their drug habits and alcohol habits. Day reporting centers, where there are various services that the individual will receive, such as helping to get employment, drug, alcohol treatment, and other services that would help those individuals. Drug controls, of course, using, I don't like these, when they use drugs to control individuals. It's almost like we use the term that you hear people talk about, fixing people. We try to stay away from that, like using Depo-Provera, which is a form of chemical castration, Chlorpromazine, deal with psychological disorders, Prozac for depression. We try not to deal with that because you want to try to help the individual. And so anyway, the key thing, these are just some of the intermediate sanctions. Home confinement is a popular one, where you can spend your time in jail at home, so to speak, go to work or church or run errands, and you'll have an electronic monitor on you. Shock incarceration. Shock incarceration is where a person, for a short period, the person is subjected to the seriousness of what long-term incarceration would be. And so it reaches the stage where it gets the person to say, okay, I guess I won't do that. They have programs called Scared Straight that were shock incarceration. And what it does is it says as soon as jail is so distasteful, the person will become a law-abiding. Yep. Yeah, it can be. That's just a general range. Yeah, it could be less than that. Yep. I've seen it last 1 day. So the answer is yes. Boot camp. That's when the person is hoisted in a paramilitary type situation where they have to get up early in the morning, they have to make up their beds, they have to take care of themselves. They have involves exercise, workout, marches, drills, and what it does is it develops discipline. I've seen young people go to boot camp and come back out and go in another direction. Okay, so these are just some of the intermediate sanctions that you should be aware of. Okay, evolving roles of the probation officer. This I'm going to go over real fast because this is actually uh, showing you how you probation officers have reached the stage now, dealing with three parts. And you'll deal with these things here, for those who wondered about that. A probation officer's roles. So it's different than it used to be, where it talks about that you have supervision and surveillance, just like law enforcement, but the use of restorative justice policies and evidence-based practices change the definition of probation and parole agent work. So what it does is it puts you almost in a counselor position. Responsibilities over the years. And this is the timeline over the last 30 years of probation officers, how you'll notice that starting from the 80s, the duties of probation officers here. All right, and notice this as we go up, they added to them. All the duties noted before, plus they added these things. If you notice, you're moving more towards becoming a counselor. All the ones located here and here, and you add these specifics in terms of dealing with inmates. Till today, you have these things all included. This is why it is required that probation officers have a bachelor's degree and not just an associate's, because you're almost like a social worker or caseworker where you're dealing with individuals to help individuals to get back on track with their lives. Okay. Okay. And then dealing finally with the change agent. As it says here, the probation officer today is referred to as a change agent. What is a change agent? That you're not only responsible for the public safety through watching and supervising, but working individually with offenders to help them receive skills and address criminal thinking, such as getting them from 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock. Everybody know what I'm talking about when I say that? Do you remember when I talked about the clock? Anybody? Okay. It's very important that you get that person going in a new direction. That's what you do as change agents. That's what your biggest role for today is, working with the offender to help them receive the skills and address that criminal thinking, getting them from 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock. Basically, one word applies to that, helping them to become what? What's the word? Starts with an R. Yep, help them to become rehabilitated. That is it, so that they don't become recidivists and return back. Okay, so that's That's an overview there. So now you know about this. You saw that earlier. You were kind of like, all right, all right. So now, the last thing I'm going to go over with you, and this is quickly for you to get ready for your quiz and your tests, also to deal with the knowledge check. And you just click begin and you do these things. Let's just try this one. Judicial policy of non-interference. We talked about this too. Concerning the internal administration of prisoners. What do we call that? Right says hands off. Right says right. Oh, it's not? I think that's wrong. I think that is absolutely correct. Maybe that might be what one of my students brought to my attention. Because, yeah, yeah, yep, yeah. So number one should be hands off. I don't care what they say. Okay. So yeah, that was what you were talking about. I thought you were talking to me about the quiz. But yeah, you're right. It can't be case law and it can't be procedural due process. So you're right. So be aware that it makes sense. No sense for the others. A judicial policy of non-interference concerning internal administration, procedural due process would not be. So it's hands off. We talked about that. So you're absolutely correct. Forget what they said. All right. So the second one, the constitutional guarantee that no agent or instrumentality of the government will use any procedures other than those procedures prescribed by law to what? Yep, that is right. So now let's go to 3. Okay, legal rules produced by judges that serve to guide the decision of other judges. We would call that stare decisis in Latin, but what is it? It's case law. So I don't care, and you're going to pick that one and then it's going to say wrong because like you said, very good. Excellent. So everybody got that. So when you look at the lecture, you'll see the rest of them. I think they're okay, from my understanding. Um, did you find the rest of them were okay? Yeah, they were okay. I remember this issue before and they still haven't fixed it. But so now everybody knows the answer to that because it doesn't make sense. Okay. So anyway, use those, go all the way through, and it'll help you prepare for your exam with that correction that we made in the class here as well. All right. And that's it for this week. Any questions about week 4? Any questions? I don't understand that part. Uh, Describing the roles. I just went over them. I just covered them just a few minutes ago. There it is right there. Roles of punishments, and then dealing with the things that individuals to deal with, the various Oops, that's wrong. Here we go. Dealing with the, let's see, I got to go back. Open it up. Come on, open up. There we go. Dang, I don't know why it's not opening up. Let's go back. Okay. You're dealing with that through here. You're dealing with it through here. Okay. There they go. Right there. And remember what your roles are. That based upon the evolving, it really lays itself out right here immediately. Evolving roles. There they are right there. This is directly it. And you go through that. See the roles all the way through. Now you've got it? Okay. All right. Anything else? Okay. So let's give you a key phrase. Anybody have any suggestions? I'm going to see if anybody can read my mind because I already know which one I'm going to use. Type it in the chat box. What do you think? Ah! Survey says top answer. You get all the points. Thank you, Bryce. But I'm going to say it now because some students say, well, I don't know what that is. You just said that's right. It's probation officer. Give me that and you get your points. See, one of the things that students will learn as they go through my classes is that I don't really give you tricky stuff. I give you stuff that the topic of the week, or I give you an interesting point, and every once in a while I throw you a curve. But this whole lecture was all about PO, probation officer. So that's it. Very good. So put that in the Dropbox and you get your points. Be sure you put it in. You can do it tonight and you get your points in right away, and then you'll see me posting that grade before the end of the night, because now I have to convert the lecture so that everybody who was not here can get it. With that, I'm going to say good night. I will see you next week for the final lecture of this course. So stay safe and enjoy your week. Uh, you're welcome. And again, if you need to reach out to me, you know how. Probably the least, uh, the worst way to reach out to me is through email. The best way is to text me or call me. Many students have found that out. And let me just ask this. Do I return texts and phone calls pretty fast? Yes or no? Yeah. Because Bryce and that's how I got to know who he really is. But that's what I'm here for. I said that, established that parameter during the first week. Uh, Try it, guys. You'll find out that your grades will go up, and you'll also get a better understanding about assignments, and you'll be able to bring things to my attention. Well, he did put in the email about the flip-flop of the answers for that study, but so yeah, we talked over a half an hour. That's right. Because if you talk to me, my role is to make you feel comfortable. I do that like no other professor. Most professors like this. Okay, here's the answer. Boom, boom, boom. Bye. Talk to you later. I'm not like that. I'm not like that when I'm teaching. I'm not like that when I'm communicating with people. I'm a person who believes in helping a person. Sometimes people are all wound up and they miss a point, or they're looking so hard for it. Just like a few minutes ago, you were looking so hard for the roles of probation officers, and there it was right there, But that's how I am. I don't mind doing that. My wife, she fusses at me. She says, "You talk to your students Sundays and Saturdays, and yeah." So, by the way, if you reach me out on Monday of next week, I won't probably call you back because that's May 3rd. That's when this journey of mine started in life. 71 years ago this Monday, a little baby boy by the name of Richard Wright took his first breath. Thank you. People look at me and says, "You don't even seem like you're even close to that." I says, "Well, it's all about how you live your life." So yep. So I will be celebrating. Actually, I'll start celebrating Saturday. My wife told me Sunday, and then Monday will be the conclusion of the actual birthday. So, all right. So when I see you guys next time, be a little easy on me because I'll be a little older. Okay. Good night, guys. See you next week. Stay safe.